What's going on here?
Dude, I'm just still pumped about King Sis, dude.
King Sisyphus of Corinth.
What a fucking G.
The king who cheated death twice.
Yeah, he's fucking great. I'm going to get a Sisyphus tattoo, I think.
Just homie hanging out with a big ass rock.
Yeah, he's just a fucking, he's just kind of a god slayer. He's just pulling con on gods, dude. If you can con people, like corporations and shit, I'm all for it. If you can con gods, you're a hero of mine. That's fucking
true.
sick. I used to do some cons here and there and shit to try and fucking, get money and fucking free food and all that. And that dude's the king of the con, dude. He's just yo, your drip is so fresh. You need these chains, dude. And fucking locks death up, dude. I'm still pumped about it.
He's the master of the grift, for sure.
Yeah, what a fucking slimy sleazeball after my own heart, dude.
Oh yeah, the best kind.
Yeah, for sure. This is Tome of Chaos podcast. So we're continuing our talk of absurdism with another OG, fucking old Al Camus, dude. Albert Camus, who wrote the I don't know if it can even be considered a book, the paper, the philosophy.
I think it's a book of essays.
Yeah,
I think the essay was the Myth of Sisyphus, and then he kind of included some other writings and incorporated it all into one book.
So all of his shit is real rad. He was also doing a lot of he was writing screenplays and shit for theater and stuff, and he's also an anarcho-syndicalist, which is after my own heart. So we're pumped to get into it. If you're reading along, we're just going to hit that first chapter. If you're listening along, just let it fucking take you away. Just fucking listen to the whole fucking thing and have your mind blown with us. Did I say we're Tome of Chaos? We're Tome of Chaos. We're crowdsourcing a religion that doesn't suck through philosophy, politics, shitty religions, shit that we've been through personally and other people that we know have been through personally, and why churches suck. And yeah, that shit's rad. So we're going to talk about the Myth of Sisyphus today.
Yes.
Dude. Chapter 1.
Chapter 1, and pure poetry.
This is our first time ever doing this shit. We don't know what we're doing, so we're gonna run through it. We're gonna bullshit through it. Maybe it'll make an hour of content. Maybe it won't. We're really good at getting on tangents, so we'll probably do a lot of that, and hopefully it's understandable to everyone, and we will come away with understanding it a little bit more. This is honestly, this is the first time you and I have really talked about this together. We've only kind of checked in with each other. But yeah, so our next few episodes are going to be diving into the Myth of Sisyphus by Al Camus. And then first off, right at the top, he enters this with one of the most I don't even know if I want to call it baller, but he makes a statement at the very beginning of this that kind of gives you a vibe that's going to take you at least through the first chapter. And we quoted that at the end of our last episode, but just to know, trigger warnings, content warning, we're going to talk about suicide. Pretty heavy. Me and Walter both have shit with that. We've both been through our own battles. We love you all. We hope that if you've been through this, or if you know people who've been through this, you can come alongside them. Maybe this is even something that they could listen to as we go through it, because absurdism, I think, ends up being kind of the solution Yeah, like in a way, right? What would you say, Walter?
For me, I think it's a really hopeful. Camus would probably cringe
it's the
at
absence of hope, right? But the willingness to move forward.
It is a way to. It is like a philosophical framework of making sense of this shit that we're in.
Yeah.
Regardless of the situation you're in, at the end of the day, the absurd comes for us all.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's what this really gets at. Is no matter how successful or unsuccessful or bad or good that it is, there's always going to be a level of uncomfortability in this world.
Yeah.
That uncomfortability is so profound that it can make you wonder if life's worth living.
For sure. And it's coming from a person who saw some shit in his life that has an ability to write about this and also understand philosophy. The dude saw Nazis march into fucking France and Paris, he went through World War II. He's had tuberculosis, shit that would make you want to fucking be done with life. And I'm sure some of his own philosophy got him through that shit. I just want to put that at the top is that if suicide makes you uncomfortable, if talking about suicide triggers things in you, if some of this, like the first reading of it that I did, almost was like, all right, like, are you trying to convince me? You know what I mean? Like in a way of like, this shit is fucked up. You know what I mean? So it's brutal. But it is, Walter called it poetry, and I stick with that. I think that it's beautifully well written. We're not going to read the whole thing. We're going to hit some quotes. We're going to hit thoughts that we have, and we're going to go on tangents talking about it. But please, please, please read this in your spare time. It's it's not an easy read, but it is short. So, pull it up and have a fucking Wikipedia next to you and shit like that as you go through it. That's how I did it.
And for me, it's really helpful to confront that stuff that makes you. For me, it was helpful, like when he lays out the nature of life and the meaninglessness at times of it and all of that shit. Having someone put it all out there and like for me to know I'm not alone and that all these thoughts have been had before and somebody else has thought all this shit, like it helped, man. Like it does, like it is heavy shit, but if you have thought before, like, why am I here? What's the point? Even if I do live a good life by whatever metrics, why did I do it? If it all just gets blinked out of existence after an end of time, like there is a level of like, for me, comfort in someone else putting all those feelings to like, paper.
Yeah. And I think that, I think the other thing is too, is if you are recently out of religion, never had a religion, things like that, you constantly get bombarded. I did, at least, with like, what's the point then? You know what I mean? If you're not going to believe in a God, what's the point? And Camus writes this as, a person who doesn't believe in gods, and like, of what the point is, or that there is no point, but there's still a reason to go on. So if you're listening to this for the first time, turn it off and go back to the episode right before this, because that's going to give you some context on Sisyphus, Camus, and absurdism. So this is kind of part 2 of however many fucking parts we're going to have.
Right.
Cool. All right, Walter, you want to start us off?
Sure. I guess we'll go back to kind of like the fundamentals of absurdism, right?
Yep.
He kind of talks about in the opening the idea of the most important philosophical concept
Yeah.
is deciding whether or not life is worth living, right?
For sure. So the direct quote would be, there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterwards.
And I can't argue with that, man.
No, fuck no. I mean, if it's life or death, you know what I mean?
Well, not even if it's life or death, right? Like, I think it's when you really think about what that all says, it's like, yeah, I mean, what's the point in knowing if there's 9 or 12 categories in the brain if your life was meaningless? If life doesn't have a meaning, why'd you spend the time figuring that out?
Yeah. There's no reason. I mean, he calls them games.
Right.
Which has to be a brutal assessment of everything that this dude worked for. You know what I mean? Like going to school and reading, the greats, probably in the heyday of the greats, you know what I mean? Like Nietzsche and shit. And then coming away and being like, that's all games. Like, we just playing games. That's practice, let's figure this shit out. So I thought that clinched me immediately, dude, where I was like, yeah, we should figure this out, as he goes on in there, and I don't know if we'll get to it as he goes on, but he takes this super seriously. Like I don't know if he had been affected by people who have committed suicide or anything like that, but I do know that the dude, you can tell it's a huge question on his mind,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the utmost of seriousness he writes about it with. I think he was talking about some guy he was told of that committed suicide, and they listed, he lost his daughter a few years back.
Yeah.
And it undermined him.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, that part I think is so just because like the absurd, right? This idea that there's a moment in your life where you break out of the habit. Like that's another great point, right? Like life is the biggest part of your survival is out of habit. Like the reason you go on living isn't always because you've chosen to live or because you want to do something. It's just what you've been doing.
Well, he brings up the point that I see many people die because they judge that life is not worth living. I see others paradoxically getting killed for the ideas or illusions that give them a reason for living. What is called a reason for living is also an excellent reason for dying. Fucking so basically he lays out here, he's like, the people who don't have meaning fucking are going to kill themselves. And then the other people who think they found out the fucking meaning are willing to kill or die for it.
Yeah.
And that fucked me up, in a real way of the struggle that I've had, of feeling, even being in a church and continuously feeling suicidal, of damn, this isn't even meaning, I'm not willing to die for fucking Christianity, but I also still want to fucking kind of die. You know, like it's a paradoxy and a juxtaposition of like, I don't know how people walk through life.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
And he says, you know, what is what you were saying? He says like, I don't have the quote down. I must have moved it, but when he's talking about that situation of the man whose daughter died, the manager of a building, he's like, as soon as you start to think, you start to be undermined.
Yeah.
Right. And that, like, it fucks me up, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you go through this childhood, right? And we all have different forms of that, and what that means is different, but like, you're not taught to question why you're alive. That's not a question your parents ask you, like, hey, why do you want to keep living?
Yeah.
That's the assumption. That's an axiom, right? Like, your parents and your teachers and everyone you know moves forward under the assumption that everyone wants to continue to live.
Yeah.
And that works for a while, right?
Yeah.
That works for most people, especially when you're a kid and you're, you know, even if you don't have a good life, there's still stuff to do. There's always something to do or something to distract you or whatever the fuck else. And then every person has this different moment of what he says, like, you start thinking, you start undermining yourself. Yeah. It's the encounter with the absurd, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's when, you know, the loss of a daughter makes you realize that there's no fucking reason, you know? What he says is, I found it here. He says, like, a more exact word cannot be imagined. Beginning to think is beginning to be undermined. Society has but little connection with such beginnings. The worm is in man's heart. That is where it must be sought. One must follow and understand this fatal game that leads from lucidity in the face of existence to flight from the light.
Woo.
Just fucking like lays out as soon as you learn, like, because one of his things is it's like you learn, what's he say? You learn to think before you learn to live, or you learn living before you learn thinking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You learn living before you learn thinking. And that was that's how I felt. As soon as I started learning to think was when I started being like, oh shit, like nothing fucking matters, you know? And that was what he calls meeting the absurd throughout, you know, the entire writing. I think that another way he describes it too earlier is he says, suicide has never been dealt with except as a social phenomenon. On the contrary, we are concerned here at the outset with the relationship between individual thought and suicide. An act like this is prepared within the silence of the heart, as is a great work of art. The man himself is ignorant of it. One evening, he pulls the trigger or jumps. And I can't describe how accurate that is. You know, of like, it is so silent. It is so in your heart, you know? Yeah. And you begin, like he calls it painting. It's like an art form in the heart, which is a fucking super strange way to describe suicidal thoughts, you know? But you you like almost romance it. That's what he's saying. He's saying like you begin to paint this picture of this is the best way to do it. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what I need to do. Like as soon as you start to think, or you become undermined, is when you're like, how the fuck do I get out of here?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like that whatever moment that is where you realize I've been surviving and I don't know why. That's when it all kind of starts undoing itself.
Yeah. And he calls it a confession. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, I think that is a big sense. So like, you know, he starts this chapter of like kind of talking about what suicide is in a man's heart and what kind of on his thoughts causes it. But then he says what it is in a sense, and as a melodrama, killing yourself amounts to confessing. It is confessing that life is too much for you, or that you do not understand it.
Yeah.
And I got to that and I had to stop.
Yeah.
You know, for a little. I had to take a little break. Because I think, I don't know. I mean, I don't, you know, when life gets too hard and you confess that it's fucking too hard, there's only one way out, you know?
There's only one logical endpoint.
Yeah.
I think is what he's kind of getting at there. Yeah, I mean, this shit is super tough. And I think that we all struggle with it in our own ways. You know, some people might not feel, I don't know. Some people might not until like the building manager that he speaks of, you know, once they lose a child. I think like, you know, it's so normal to just keep going that unless something kind of catastrophic happens to shake it up enough.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it'll never be a huge concern of yours, like why I'm here, maybe, right? For a while.
Until the point comes, right? I think that's what he's saying is like the point comes for everyone.
Yeah. You face the absurd at some point.
Yeah, which I think is hope. It brings this weird sense of hope of that everyone meets the absurd at some point.
Yeah. Well, what it points out is that we're all fucking, at the end of the day, we're all clueless people on a fucking reasonless rock.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to be like, I figured it out.
Yeah.
This is it. I think I've got it this time.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me change the code a little bit. Let me, do this, do that. Like fucking this job's going to make me happy. This fucking routine, this walk to work, this meditation practice, this fucking whatever is going to change it for me. And then all those things are met with that same absurdity.
Right. And I think that's his critique of Kierkegaard.
Yeah.
Because Kierkegaard basically said the foundational statements of life is absurd. We're all seeking meaning and there isn't one. But what he does with that is he submits to a higher power.
Yeah. Yeah.
He says there must be a God. And this is, I should read Kierkegaard just so I can speak on this a little more. But this is what Camus refers to as philosophical suicide, of inventing some kind of conclusion that defeats the absurd.
Yeah.
So in Kierkegaard's case, he invents a God that defeats the absurd, right? The man can never know the reason, so there is the absurdity there, but you defeat the absurd with a God that does know the reason.
Yeah, and one day you can find it out, right?
Right.
That like the hope for Christianity is one day you'll know. Like it was always like, you know, I've given people my 3 reasons for like what God is. And I think they're pretty sound. I've been saying them for years, but it's like one of those is that God loves you. God knows all. God knows, you know, the numbers of hair on your head, and he loves you infinitely, but you'll never understand his ways, and you got to be okay with that. And then one day you'll find it out. You'll find out the reason for everything, the reason for fucking Hitler and all that shit. Like, you'll find it out. And I think for some people that is super comforting. For some people that is like, my God knows what's going on. I don't completely know. Maybe I don't even have to take a stance on the things that are bigger than me. And that's okay, you know? Like, and that wasn't okay with me. You know what I mean? Like, that was not, I wasn't okay with just kind of going along with the shit and being like, well, you know, like the Bible says it's not cool with gay people, but, you know, that's on God.
Yeah.
You know?
Even in that case, though, it's a leap, right? You're still, even though you're admitting the absurd and you're, you know, questioning the reasoning of life, you're making this leap to assume there is a God that does know the reason.
Yeah.
Maybe reason doesn't exist. Maybe there isn't even the concept of reason is a human construct, right? Like, and I think that's what Camus is like when you make this leap, you have quieted the voice, but you haven't solved the problem.
Yeah. And before I think we're moving forward quickly, I wanted to throw out real quick.
Yeah, we can jump around.
Yeah, just a few. One thing that struck me was this quote, living naturally is never easy. You continue making the gestures commanded by existence for many reasons, the first of which is habit. Dying voluntarily implies that you have recognized, even instinctively, the ridiculous character of that habit, the absence of any profound reason for living, the insane character of that daily agitation, and the uselessness of suffering. And that shit really, I don't know, that shit fucking slays. Like,
yeah, it's an incredible observation.
And you know, I don't know if I said it in the last episode or in this one, of points in this where you're like, oh man, he's like telling me to do it. You know, like, you know, like I was like, God damn, Walter, why'd you say this was like up my alley? You know, like you know, like, are you trying to fucking tell me something? You know?
I guess, okay, so just in my defense, when I listen to or consume something really sad,
yeah,
it has like an opposite effect on me.
For sure, me
like,
too.
The song "Funeral" by Phoebe Bridgers,
yeah,
by no means could be called like a really happy, upbeat song.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I listen to it, the humanity of it and the empathetic or relational nature of being able to hear someone else who's also just a person hurting the same way that I've hurt.
Yeah.
Or feeling the same way that I've felt.
Yeah.
I think there's something about that like, even if what they're feeling is I should commit suicide and what I'm relating to is the fact that they're saying that and I've also felt that way,
yeah,
it'll actually leave me in a place where I think, okay, maybe there is something to life.
Yeah, other people go through it. There's
a connection.
Yeah, there is a connection. And I think that is what struck me about this and kind of where I felt solace at, you know, of like, damn, like I didn't know other people had these thoughts, let alone a dude write about it. You know what I mean? And I don't think at any time is what the great thing is like, I think when you talk suicide, you have two stances of it, right? It's the saddest thing that ever happened. You know what I mean? And like, you get the sorries and the fucking, you know, all that, or you get the fucking, it's selfish. And you know where I stand on that.
I mean, that's a horrific thing to say.
It's a horrific thing to say. You don't know what fucking people are going through. But I do think that what Camus does is he sets you up in this way of like how brutal it is without ever saying that it's selfish, without ever saying that, you know what I mean, it's the worst thing someone could do, or you're a coward, that's the coward's way out, or whatever. Like what he's writing is fucking beautifully traumatic. It's beautifully worded. For the saddest thing that I think could happen is someone deciding, you know, they don't want to be here anymore. But even, you know where I stand of like, that's that person's choice. You know, I hope that they get help, they find their help. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to fucking be here, if you've exhausted all those resources, like, and I mean, I have a list, dude. I have a list of things that I have to do before I fucking do it. You know what I mean? And I think that was the thing that the way he talks about it, and the way he talks about it for the first however many paragraphs of this poem, you know, of this beautiful thing, is like, almost like he's saying, I could see why you would do it.
No, I mean, he basically lays it out as the logical conclusion to being a person.
Yeah. And then
it's not laid out in a way that it's like, you're broken, you're depressed, it's a shameful act. It's just like, yeah, I get it. Yeah. This is why you would want to take your life.
Yeah. You met with the absurd. You were undermined. I mean, he goes right after that quote. He says, you know, a world that can be explained, even with bad reasons, is a familiar world. But on the other hand, in a universe suddenly divested of illusions and lights, man feels an alien, a stranger. His exile is without remedy, since he is deprived of the memory of a lost home or a hope of a promised land.
God damn.
This divorce between man and his life, the actor and his setting, is properly the feeling of absurdity. All healthy men, having thought of their own suicide, it can be seen without further explanation that there is a direct connection between this feeling and the longing for death.
It's insane, dude. That shit fucking, it is some of the most poetic shit I've ever heard.
It is. It's so poetic. It is that you meet the point where you feel alien. Like that, you know, like I think I spoke too soon in the last episode, because when I first was reading this, it felt like, when I was first reading this, it was like, dude, like this isn't the only reason that people fucking kill themselves. But he hits that reason in that of like that feeling of like nothing matters leads to you feeling alien, that you are different, that you are alone. You know what I mean? That brings in that depression, that sadness, those things. And he's like, just that fucking, he's like, there is a direct connection between this feeling and the longing for death. Just to end it, to stop suffering, to stop working in the monotony, to quit the habit.
Yeah. Yeah, staying alive is a habit, man.
Jesus.
It is, you know, it's a weird, it's like getting hit by like a fucking truck, dude. It's like, you know, the confrontation with being alive and like what you're going to do with the rest of it. I think it's like you wake up hopefully with this sense of invigoration, but where you get that from, I think, is the real concern.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of fucking where we even are.
So he starts saying that, you know, the subject of this essay is between the absurd and suicide. This is a part that I was looking at too, is stated clearly this problem may seem both simple and insoluble, but it is wrongly assumed that simple questions involve answers that are no less simple, and that evidence implies evidence. A priori, and reversing the terms of the problem, just as one does or does not kill oneself, it seems that there are but two philosophical solutions, either yes or no. And I think that what he's saying there is that, you know, simply, is life worth living or is it not?
Yeah.
And that's as he goes through and starts talking about the contradictions and things like that.
Yeah. This shit is tough, man. I think what he's going to get into how to live with the absurd without explaining it away in the ways that like Kierkegaard has, or like because I think that's our gut out.
What's that? Walter, you cut out, buddy. You want to go back a few steps?
Sure. I think that the ideas of, you know, coming up with a leap to cover up the absurd, the way Kierkegaard, he says, does, right? With bowing down to God. I feel like I was there too when I came around the church for the first time and was able to actually join it. Was, oh, wow, I have a solution. I have an answer. And that lasted for a while until it didn't.
Yeah.
And that's why I think like the idea of finding this stuff out without those leaps is beautiful. And one thing he said that really stuck out to me is that people confuse, I believe this is in the first chapter. He says people confuse life being worth living with life having a meaning.
Yeah.
Like he's like, we can start from the assumption that life has no reason, that it has no purpose, that it has no meaning. But that doesn't answer the question if life is worth living.
Yeah. I think he calls it, is that what he calls absurd reasoning?
I think so.
Yeah.
I might have to look into it more, but the idea that you can have a life that didn't serve a purpose or a reason, and yet it was a life worth living, I think is a really beautiful idea. And I think that's why Sisyphus becomes his poster child.
Yeah.
This character that is condemned to a life without meaning, or a punishment without reason or meaning, and yet he imagines him smiling. I think that's kind of what we're trying to find, is like a way through this life that allows it. We don't have to create an answer. Mm-hmm. We can accept it as it is and yet move forward regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, this is sad. You know, like the first chapter is hard, and I'm excited to get through more, to really find out what his why to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first chapter kind of ends on him asking, you know, does the absurd dictate death? This is this problem must be given priority over others, outside all methods of thought and all exercises. And I think that I'm excited to see what his answer is. You know, like, does the absurd dictate death? You know, I mean, I know that his answer is no, you know, but I'm excited to see why.
I think he makes it clear that despite the fact that we do live in an absurd world, I think from basically the first chapter, he's making it clear that he believes that life is worth living regardless.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't be covering this otherwise.
Yeah, for sure.
A book that basically said life isn't worth living and it's absurd to try to live.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he, you know, the sadness that he has, you know, of when he talks about people killing themselves and shit like that, just goes to show that he's trying to solve this problem, you know. So I'm excited to keep going. That lays out kind of a lot of his arguments, is that there, for some reason, we are born, we realize that life is absurd, and as soon as we realize that, we think, like, why the fuck do we want to be here? Is basically the vibe of that first chapter. So I hope you guys read along with that, and I hope that we did an all right job of kind of giving you the cliff notes of that first chapter. Like I said, it's brutal. Like I said, that, you know, there were times where I was reading it and I was just like, God damn, you know, like, this is hard. But I hope that, my hope is that we can find actual reasoning to stay living that's not just believing in a God that's bigger than us, that's going to take care of all of it, you know?
Yeah.
And that for the people who don't have that, you know? So yeah, that's all I got. You got anything else, Walter? Walter? I think I lost Walter. He's not coming through. But you there?
Hello?
You're there. You're back. Kind of. Can't hear anything you're saying. Well, I think that's the end. Unless Walter can come back through. Oh, are you there? Walter's there, we promise. He did not give himself up to the absurd. We just want to let you guys know that we love you. Sorry for the weird ending of Walter, you know, not being here.
I want to be here.
Oh, he's here.
I love you guys. I hope we can take some stuff out of this absurdism and turn it into good tome shit to base our lives on.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we hope that, I don't know, that people need this, you know, and that it'll be a good resource for people who have met the absurd, like we have. And yeah, that's all I got to say.
Hell yeah.
If you guys want to, like, subscribe, follow, give us a review, you can do all that. Also, if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to fucking just tell us we're doing a good job, we love that. You can send those to Tome of Chaos Podcast at gmail.com. There is, I don't know. I feel like anyone who's going through this shit, if you feel like you need somebody, you can always email us. There is a suicide hotline here in the States that I want to pull up and give the number to, just in case, for anyone who's going through that. It's 1-800-273-8255. I've called this number, and people on the other end just want to talk to you. So that's a lifeline, and use it. Use it if you need it. And I hope that Chaos walks with you guys this week. We love you.
Peace.